So this was the last slide. This is where we left off last time we were here. I got confirmation from Pearl High School. Mr. Bolanos is not going to be taking aviation this semester. So then there were 9. How many more students are going to need psychiatric treatment in order to survive classes? How many people in here are currently under psychiatric treatment because of me as your instructor? Raise your hand if you're not. Okay, most of you are taking psychiatric treatment then, all right. So a good test question would be, name the 3 different places you can get data to tell how to fix an aircraft. And which one, so that you would name those 3. But also ask preferred data. And what's the second data? What's the first data? If Josh was taking the test right now and he could read his notes, he would get 100% on that test. All right. So here we go. I may have said, I believe I said it before, and I'm going to say it again so you write it down. An aircraft is not airworthy after maintenance is performed until the person doing the maintenance makes maintenance record, or he writes it in the logbook. That would be okay to say it that way. The aircraft is not airworthy until, if maintenance is done, if you haven't written it down in the logbook, whoever did it, whether it's a private pilot changing the engine oil, or a mechanic changing a landing gear, or a manufacturer changing something, or a certified repair station, the paperwork's got to get done. And for you as a mechanic with a power plant and an airframe rating, unless you're working at a repair station and there's some other way of signing it off, you are going to be signing it off with your certificate number. So what we're going to go through right now is the things you have to do when you make that maintenance record. Not just what are the FAA minimum requirements, which is legally okay. Things that are a really, really good idea for you to write down every time you do it. And I mean, this is important because, one, on this slide, I'm taking questions off of it on the test. Number 2, most of, say, 9 of the lab projects that we're, the last thing you do on that lab project is you're going to write a maintenance logbook entry Xerox it and do it. It's going to be just for fun. Well, if it's not one of the 8 colors or a light or a dark version of it, weird pink, does that count? Pink is really just light red, right? It's dark pink. I think it's got a little bit of orange in it. So I'm thinking it's either salmon or fuchsia. Chartreuse is baby puke green. Nobody even knows what chartreuse is. All right, who cares? So here's the list of things that need to go in a maintenance logbook entry. You either need to write down what model of aircraft it is, like Cessna 152. Or if it's a Lycoming 0320, you would write down the airplane or the engine or the propeller, the model number. And SN stands for serial number. And the reason you're going to do that is because you don't want somebody taking your maintenance entry and tearing that page out and then sticking it into the maintenance logbook of another airplane because you didn't put the serial number on it. Because if you said, I've done a 100-hour inspection, and somebody has an airplane and you didn't write down the serial number on your entry, they take that page and they go put it in their logbook on their airplane, but the airplane hasn't been inspected, and now it crashes. They're going to say, Jaron, have you not brought your textbooks back to class? You did a 100-hour inspection and did a terrible job. And so we're going to pound you and your certificates because you violated FARs, because you said, but we can obviously see what you do. So you're going to put the manufacturer, the model, and the serial number. And we're going to do an example here shortly. Now you have to write down the date finish the work. You notice I put under, maybe you want to underline it, but I think I mentioned it a day or two ago. You write down the date, finish the work. Let's say you're doing annual inspections. You've got an AMT mechanic certificate plus. What else do you have to have in order to do an annual inspection? You need an AMT mechanic certificate plus. Which stands for authorized inspector. You have an inspection authorization. AMP for 3 years, and then take a big old hairy hourly written test. And then you can do an annual inspection, and then you can do major repairs and major alterations. Yeah, out of that 36 months, you must have actively used it for 24. Thank you for correcting me once again, Josh. Just keep that up. Don't worry, Josh. I got so many black stars. Bought a box, cubic foot box, and the stars are only this big. But I've used it faster. In any case, sorry, I'm in a terribly good mood. I apologize. I'm doing an annual inspection on the aircraft, and the owner brought it to me on January 15th. It's very possible they could say, don't finish it until February 1st, okay? Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. And you could say, okay. And then you leave that last one panel without getting turning screws on it. And you wait until February 1st, you come in at 8 o'clock. You all filled out except the date. Now you can write the date in it. The owner your annual is February 1st. Until February 1st, sign off the annual inspection. Privately owned. Not anybody. Josh. Right. Annuals last for 4 months. So if the annual gets done on February 1st and that owner starts flying it, when is the last day that it's valid? The last day of February, 12 months later. So the owner is actually getting 12.9 months out of it, huh? If you had signed it off, if the AMP with an signed it off on January 31st, then it's only back until the last day. That's out of it. Annual inspections work. All right. Just make sure you get that part. So, but in any case, you don't write down the date you started it. You don't write down the day you did most of the work. You write down the date that you finished it. TTIS stands for 4 words. And in fact, you'll even see those words on this piece of paper. It's total time in service. TTIS stands for total time in service. That'd be a great test question for me to ask you. Concerning logbook entries, what does TTIS stand for? Service of the aircraft. How the FAA wants everybody, everything is into the next thing down. But at total time, it also be aircraft total time. I've seen it ACTT. We're not going to do that. You don't have to write it down. Total time. I've also seen it abbreviated TTF, total time since new. They all mean the same thing. We're just going to use TTIS. Because when you install it on the what? So 50, 100, or an hour later, they can say, oh, you put the hours on it. Now the aircraft on it. Component. That makes sense? I was going to write the total time in service of the aircraft. The Hobbs meter is a little gauge on the airplane, and in fact, they're even on our simulators. And when the oil pressure goes up, a little switch closes, and it connects the Hobbs meter to the battery. and the Hobbs meter starts spinning, and it goes in tenths of an hour, 0.0, 0.1, 0.2, and it adds up how many hours the engine is running. And this is how many hours the airplane has on it. So, similar to the odometer in a car, in that how much the aircraft has been used. This Hobbs meter, when the engine in a car, you start up, but you park. Does the odometer move? No. So it's kind of the same, and that's how you look at it to see how much operated, but they aren't. Now there's a second gauge in the aircraft, and when we just before break, we're going to look at it. But the engine tachometer that tells you the engine RPM, 0, and usually the red line is somewhere around 2,700 RPM. In that tachometer is what looks like an odometer. It might say 5,299.4. This is also in hours, and the Hobbs meter is also in hours. The Hobbs meter kicks in, and it measures 6 minutes, it rotates 0.1, because 6 minutes is 1 minute. Whether it's running with flying or not. An aircraft, you only have to keep track of how many hours the airplane. When you're doing maintenance, you only have to keep track of how many hours the airplane was flying. The engine starts up, and you goof around on the radio, and you set on, and you're at Yosemite International Airport, clearance, and you tax there, and you run the engine. You might have 0.2 hours on the Hobbs meter before you take off. Then after you land, you're going to have to taxi back, and you're going to park the airplane and turn everything off and run your. I'm exaggerating a little. But every hour, that little tiny, if it's a little tiny airplane, every hour you really 0.1 or 0.2 that's on the Hobbs meter, but you didn't really fly. Airplane, and you 100-hour inspections. You want to have throw it away. 0.2 is percent. So it would accumulate faster than normal. You 10 or 20. The way it used to get done is before takeoff, you'd write down the takeoff time, and then after you landed time, and you'd come into the office and you'd say, "Well, I flew 1.3." If you're paying by the hour, because you're going to try to cheat, not you. Well, you will, Josh. Nobody else would try to cheat, right? All right. So that's why they put it in there. All right. So airplane, you pay by the Hobbs meter. This tachometer, it spins around a little bit like an odometer. For some reason, my dot went. Why does that leave? There we go. Look at that. It disappears. Why is it doing that? Okay, finally it stayed. Let's say if you're flying this airplane, normally you run it around 2,400 RPM. They're going to set this tachometer. So in flight, if the needle is pointing at 2,400 RPM, then for every 60 minutes, this will rotate 1 hour. So it's a little bit more accurate. In fact, here's what's interesting. Let's say you're on the ground and you're idling at 800 RPM. 800 130 24. I mean, you have to even show 1 minute. Guess what? The maintenance, nobody does the maintenance. pilot airplanes on the hot the aircraft in the hot meter, we're going to use because it shows actually a. Because what if I run the engine at 2300 in? Am I gonna? Will it show even running for an hour? It'll show. On little airplanes, they have this window in there, and where the main. So actually, what I want you to do is, if you've already written the word Hobbs, just cross out the word Hobbs, because what we're use is the tach time. This just don't even write in the word Hobbs. In fact, I'm going to cross it out just because it makes me look at that. My little decimal almost disappeared again. What's up with that? All right. Question? I'm going to stop trying now. The reason we're going to write down when with crafted, so that we'll know how many hours that component has been in the aircraft. But if AD that on that component, and it says every 100, I need to know, well, this is when I bolted it in, I got to connect it or do something on the AD 100 hours since it got bolted. Or what if you did a 100-hour inspection? You have to know when the next one is due. 100-hour inspections are due based on hours flown, not on how many calendar months. So what we're going to do is we're always going to be a habit pattern of writing these down. So I'm putting both of these up there. You either have to write down a description of the work you did, or you have to reference the data that you used. But we're going to do both. It is a really, really, really good habit pattern. Like, for instance, if you're a private pilot and you're the owner or operator of an airplane, you can look at FAR 43, preventive maintenance, and it says do the spark plugs. Or your airplane, you think that one of the about the spark plugs and inspect them and clean them and them. And you do that, you find a little piece of in it, you put it back in the airplane. You torque everything up, you put the cowling on the engine back on, and you run up the airplane and it fixed it, and you go, yay, you can't fly it yet. Why can't you fly it yet? Because you haven't signed it off. You haven't made a logbook entry yet. So do you have to make logbooks entries the same way as mechanics do, as a pilot? What do you do differently? So your logbook entry as a private pilot changing spark plugs, you're saying that is different than a mechanic who did the exact same changing of the spark plugs. Well, okay, but the words, I get your point, but the words that you would write in, it'd be the same. Right, instead of putting a mechanic number, you'd put a pilot certificate number. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to write down removed, cleaned, inspected, reinstalled all 8 spark plugs, or all spark plugs. And then you would say, in accordance with, either the spark plug or the engine manual. I've done work. Funny, if you look at the maintenance manual, it doesn't tell you work on how to get the spark plug up. And then, and then in one combing manual, it doesn't tell you how much. You got to go. You're supposed to turn the spark plug. So let's just say that was the case in this case. We'd say, in a champion spark plug maintenance. So saying what I did, I removed, I cleaned, I gapped, I inspected the spark plugs and reinstalled them. That's what I did. That's the work I did. Reference is I'd write down, and you can, in the notes over here is reference, you're going to put in parentheses, you can say the name of the manual and the page number. You could also use the figure, because sometimes there's figures. And if it's 5 pages, you would put like spark plug maintenance manual, or, champion spark plug maintenance manual, pages 7 through 9. Or 7 through 9, comma, 14. Whatever it is. So, and the reason I want you to get this habit pattern, I've got a seminar by an aviation attorney who defends airplane mechanics. I just say, what is data used? Because 2, 4, 5, 10 years. Everyone they can, because this is the United States of America. The United States of America, these kinds of attorneys name everybody they aircraft manufacturer. They'll name every mechanic that touched it in the last 10 years. They'll the frame manufacturer, propeller manufacturer, everybody get out of who. And so, it says here that you changed the spark plugs in this airplane 17 years. How do you know you did it right? According to the Champion Spark Plug Manual, pages 7, 8, and 9. So right there, I wouldn't have written it down there, and that's what I did, because you see my signature? I did it. That means I promise, I swear, that's what I did. It's man. How could you swear? Was it the same? The spark plug. It's kind of. An investigation. I know. I got my master's school. Depends. If the engine quits running, did it run out of oil because it leaked in, or did it run out? There wasn't enough oil in there before they took off. So you got to. You got to look on the airplane to see if the oil came out in flight. If there's no traces of oil at the bottom of the airplane, oil didn't come out in flight. Maybe there wasn't enough before they took off. So it can get very complicated. Most of the time, if you want to be an accident investigator, they want you to be or a mechanic. If you're probably do better, and you're probably more likely to get hired as an accident investigator. And get at least an instrument rating. Don't just get your be an accident investigator. Get your private and also get an instrument rating, because always the airplane is on an instrument flight plan. Just in case you want to grow up and be an accident investigator. If you don't want to grow up and you still want to be an accident investigator, that's okay. All right, so you're going to write down the description of the work and the reference to the data, which is going to include the name of the manual and the page numbers. The asterisks I'm putting on there, I'm not going to ask you about those, but I wrote this up for airplane mechanics. The asterisk means that the FAA doesn't say you have to do this, but it's ridiculous not to do it. And you're going to write that, you're going to actually print out your name. The FAA also doesn't say you have to put your name, but most people do, and it's really, really nice for other people in the logbook to see the name. Somehow, some way they can find out who did it, but it's very nice to put your name. So we're going to be consistent and do all of our logbook entries the way Mr. Johnson thinks they need to be done. What about helicopters? It's exactly the same. This is identical whether it's an airplane, a helicopter, a gyroplane, a glider, a blimp, powered lift. I'm trying to think if a hot air balloon, a helium balloon, a jet, or a piston-powered airplane. It's all the same. Then you're going to sign it with your signature. Sign it with your signature. How else could you sign it? Could you sign it without your signature? Yeah, that doesn't. I don't think the FAA would say that counts as your signature, unless it was in ink. Unless you did it all the time, exactly the same way. Then you could say that is my signature. And then you're going to write down your certificate number. If you were an AMT mechanic, technically, the type of certificate you have is mechanic, but everybody writes down A and P, or just AP. For a private pilot, and what you're doing is under FAR 43 Appendix D, you would write capital P for private pilot. I would write CM, or CP for commercial pilot. So now we're going to practice one. Any questions so far? I know this is thrilling stuff. Yay, paperwork. I love paperwork, except for when I don't like it a lot. Oh, yeah. Sorry. You got to do it in ink, included in lab. The FAA doesn't say you have to do it in ink. The FAA implies it has to be permanent. Could you make a maintenance logbook entry in pencil? And then you sign it, and you date it, and all that stuff, and then somebody comes after you and erases what you did and writes something else in there. And now you're responsible. Put it in ink, put it in ink, put it in ink. So I'm telling you that it has to be blue or black. I'm telling you, not that the FAA says that, but I'm telling you for laboratory purposes, no red, no purple, no yellow, no chartreuse, no mauve. It's got to be black or blue. Just like the color of my skin in junior high at the end of every lunch hour when I went to fifth period, because I always got beat up in junior high. So we're going to see how much I can remember from the previous page. So on these lab sheets, I want to explain something to you. This is an excerpt from a typical logbook, and in the front of the logbook, it would have the manufacturer and the model number and the serial number. There's not a space for that on here. But the assumption that we're going to be on a label, and we're handing this to the owner. So that piece of paper, the manufacturer of the aircraft or the engine, and the model and the serial number on it. So what we're going to be doing on our lab sheets is we're going to, let's see if I can get this to come up. There it is. So we're going to go, this is a Cessna 152, serial number 152 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Cessna likes to do that. Their serial numbers, generally the first three digits of the model of the aircraft. So we're going to do this on every one of our pieces of paper. We're going to write down the manufacturer, the model number, and the serial number. And then we're going to put the date. So we're pretending that it's 2018 and the day we did it. I don't care if you put January, but you can put 1 dash. Is today the 11th? Question? You do not. You're asking a great question. I am on this slide because my handwriting is terrible. I put everything in capital letters. If you want to do all in capital letters, you can. The trick is it has to be. You're going to get graded. I'm going to read these, and every entry is 10 or 20% of your lab grade is going to be this. It's probably 10%. And if it's not legible, then I'm just going to draw a line through it, and on the bottom I'll write illegible, and then I'm going to reread it as if you hadn't written that in there. So if it helps you write more legible, write in capital letters, that's okay. But no, you do not have to write in capital letters. Pardon me? No, we're always going to use the date. I'm going to give you the make and model and the serial number. And of it, I may give you the times, like the total time in service and the tachometer reading. So we're always going to use that due, the day you finish the work. Oh, right now? No, isn't today the 11th? Sorry, that's not showing up. It shows up on the left screen. It shows 1-11. So it's January 11th, isn't that correct? If you'd rather write JAN 11, that's okay. You know, for January, anybody ever heard of that? JAN is abbreviation? All right, all right. So the tach time, so that's off of the tachometer. We'll say that that is 5,291.7. And you'll notice, I'm going to put my decimal really big, it doesn't like my decimals, this is a big mistake that people make. You got to put in the decimals. Now, if this tachometer was installed in the aircraft when it was new and they never had to replace it, then the tachometer reading, and remember, look at that. It says total time in service. It would be the same. If I can make it work. 5291.7. So you have to write small, but you got to write legible. So sorry, you got to do both. So like my 1969 Cessna 172, it has the original tachometer. It still works. And it's 5,300 and something. At 100 miles an hour, that's 500,000 miles. Well, it's almost 50 years old. All right, so let's do the spark plug. So I'm going to do all capital letters, but you don't have to. Remove. Cleaned. You know what? I'm just going to say, look. What you're going to do, don't worry if you screw up. What I'm going to have you do is practice on one before you write the one you're going to turn in. I'm going to write the word serviced. Because serviced means I cleaned it, I gapped it, and I inspected it. Serviced. Reinstalled all spark plugs. You're going to take up multiple lines. So yes, it's okay to do that. IAW, and that stands for in accordance with. And everybody knows what IAW. If you're not doing capital letters, do IAW in capital letters. Cessna 152. And everyone knows what MX means. Manual. Pages 37, 38. Ops. Check. Good. Now, notice I didn't write this part down there about the ops check being good. That's a technique. If you don't put that in there, I'll probably tell you to do it next time and not take off points. But if you could make a list of the top 5 or 10 things about habit patterns you need to be a good mechanic, those habit patterns is you fit and you're ready to sign customer. If there's any way at all to confirm that what you did fixed it, you're going to do it. If you just plugs out and put them back in, make sure the engine runs correctly. If you change oil on an aircraft engine, guess what you do? You start up the engine, oil comes out. You shut it. And then you sign off the log. Now, No, I want you to print out your name. You don't have to use middle initials, and you don't have to use middle names. You can if you want to. But you got to write down, we're going to pretend in this class that you all have a mechanic certificate with an airframe and a power plant rating. I like to put the little and between the A and P, but a lot of people just put A and then a P with no space, and that's okay. I don't mind. And then make up a number. I don't care. Make up a 6-digit number. I'm not even going to look to see if it's the same number all the time. So let's go through. Question? Well, that's A and. That's an and symbol. That's not ATP. Here, I was trying to do this. I was trying to make an and symbol, but it came out lousy. So if you just want to put A and then a P, that's fine. Question? No, I actually don't want you to skip a line. So Mr. Sandoval has a good question. Do we skip a line? If I skipped a line before I signed it, there'd be an empty line. Could somebody... Oh, no, keep going. Just keep writing. In fact, somebody would say, look, somebody could write some words in here. Let's just draw a line through that right there. That way nobody can come behind me and write something in there. Let's just say I wrote stuff down. And that. If I sign it right, if I put my name and stuff down here, this line right here, I would take my ink pen and put a line through it. Yeah, I want you to do that because what you want is no one to be able to go above your signature and write anything in. It just depends on your handwriting. You don't need to write the line after your signature line, but if there's enough gap in here that somebody could say, I overhauled the entire engine, and you find an ink pen that's the same color as what you did, that's not going to be good for you, is it? Somehow, some way, you're going to wish that didn't happen. So if there's any gap, like even this much of a gap, go ahead and put a line in there. And definitely don't skip a line. Don't write your try to make it pretty. Oh yeah, it's like a signature on the left. You need to skip a line or two. No! Don't skip a line. So what I'd like you to do is go back to that list. Let's see how much of that list I can remember. So you got to write down the manufacturer, model, and serial number. I got that all at the top. 152 serial number. Blah, blah. You got to write down that you work. You got to write down the total. Case is 5297, 591.7. Have a pattern of writing both of them down, even if they're the same. Because what if the tachometer went bad at 2,000 hours? On this one, it would read total time in service, and tachometer would only read 30. So you need to get in a habit pattern of writing both of those down. Down the description of what, in this case, I removed spark plug and reinstalled all the spark plugs. You notice I used the word all. If I had just done one cylinder, I would have said remove service reinstalled spark plugs from cylinder number 2. Or the top spark plug in cylinder number 5. So you want to be reasonably deliberate that what you say can't be misconstrued that you worked on less or you worked on more. All right, so there's the description. And then I wrote down the reference data. IAW stands for in accordance with. In accordance with means I did it the way this book said. So I wrote the name of the book, the Section 152 Maintenance Manual, and I wrote down the pages that gives instructions on how to remove and replace spark plugs. And do I have to write? You know why I don't have to write it down? Because the moment I sign and put in that last line, I am swearing that I did everything correct. The airplane is ready to fly. Not that something else isn't wrong with the airplane, because I just did a 100-hour inspection? And the airplane is safe? All I'm doing is saying that those 8 spark plugs are good. All the spark plugs are awesome. That I did it correctly. So how do I know if I did it correctly if I didn't start up and run it? Humanly possible. Like, for instance, if you fix something electrical, you don't. Okay, make sure the circuit breaker is on. So then I put down my name, I put down my signature, I put down my type of certificate, and I put down my certificate number. Did I miss anything on the list? If I watch this, if I hit escape and I say keep and I exit out and I say save, I now have an electronic record. Here, I'll open it back up. Electronic records are okay. Looks like ink to me. Now, can somebody come back later and write on top of it? Surely. You know, you can't stop everything. Pink out? I think it's salmon out. Yes. 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 What's going to happen is I'm going to show you where we keep these, and I'm going to practice. And then on your homework, if you're smart, you'll take the one that you just did that you really have. Because lab work. Yes, you have homework. You must study for all the tests. And yes, you have homework. On Monday morning, go to school. And to go online and watch the video. From this week or picture this week, you'll be able to find those notes. You pay Aaron money to let you take pictures of his notes, under the assumption that he takes notes, and under the assumption that you can read his notes, and under the assumption that he doesn't charge you, and under the assumption that you don't kick him in the shins for not bringing in his textbooks. That's a lot of assumptions there. Are we coming tomorrow? I'm coming today. There's no transportation? The bus from Selma's not running tomorrow? Well, then you don't get to come tomorrow. I'm going to be here. They pay me money and stuff. You don't have to, Monday or Friday? Okay, Friday there's class, but there's no lecture. So just like last semester, Fridays have no graded activity. We're gonna fly unmanned aerial vehicles. It looks like I have 5 of them that work correctly. I have 6, but Jonathan broke the first one. And that means that no one will have to share them with more than one other person. And I have if you have an RC aircraft on Friday and on the including a plane, and on the days you can bring what you flew. You can fly what you brought. You can bring what you flew. All right. The good news is I have 4 or 5 batteries for each one. Each battery runs about 10 minutes. No, I just remembered something. That school, the exact same drones, because I ordered. That's what after class. That way each of these 5 drones will probably have 7 batteries, maybe 8. So between 2 people, if you've got 8 batteries, that's 4. And what you're going to do when you're not flying it, you're going to be the visual observer. What is it? It's 2-hour class, an hour and 50-minute class. For the first hour and 45 minutes tomorrow, we're just going to cover the... I'm kidding, it won't take an hour and 45 minutes. No, when we go out and fly the UAVs, until we get better at it, we're going to stay inside of the football field, inside the track, and we're not going to fly outside. No. I use the same because I don't want you to. I guess it is. The rule would be there whether I lost it or not. And it's last year. You can, and the rule was no more than 50 feet high, and you had to stay inside of the track. So if there was somebody running around the track, you wouldn't overfly them. And the second time, I had to tell him to stop overflying people. I told him that he was done because he didn't do it. He could fly the machine well enough to not overfly people, and yet he overflew people. And now the good thing is, it's actually against FAA regulations for me to overfly a UAV over someone who's not participating in the event. So like if I'm training all of you, technically I could fly over you because you're all participating. But so when it's 400 feet above the building, if you're with, so if here's a building, 400 feet. So but we're not going to get. I'd have to near an airport, so I never worried about it. If you're going to fly inside of Class D, C, or B airspace, then for sure you better not fly inside of those classes of airspace. But like really international, that's a good question. How close can you get? I would therefore have to look it up. All right, let's take a break until 25 after. 25 after. Send me an email, and I will get them together.